Welcome to another episode of the SoleSavy podcast. My name is Marco Henry Negrete. I'm the VP of Content and Communications at SoleSavy. And today I'm joined by a friend of mine, an OG in the industry at this point, a decade in, and the creator of modern notoriety, Oscar Castillo. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming. You and I have been going back and forth for, I don't know, it feels like a couple of months now talking about that. Oscar joined SoleSavy a couple of months ago and has been offering some amazing feedback, which means a lot to us as somebody who's been in the sneaker community, building community for a long time. It's been great to have him as a member and somebody, again, a soundboard for us as we continue to try to build SoleSavy to be the best sneaker community in the world. So I'm glad to have him here. I want to talk a little bit about your journey in sneakers, maybe some of the best stories you have, and then kind of what you're looking forward to in the future, and your thoughts on the sneaker industry and sneaker culture as a whole right now. But before I do that, I would love for you to give just a quick intro about yourself, where you're from, and what it is that you do.
It's always been hard for me to explain to people what it is that I do because it's just so many things. I started as a sneaker blogger, right? It's a lot of us came from blogging about sneakers, and I first started with Sneaker Files in 2007. And then I blogged a little bit with Nice Kicks and a few other blogs. And then I got my first job at a sneaker boutique called Subconscious. And at that time, this whole industry was just it was still such a young thing. You know what I mean? Like it was like it hadn't even blown up. So I'm very grateful to have been a part of the very, the beginning, like the cusp of it, right? Between working at the sneaker store and then blogging about product, it was like a good combination of things on both ends, because I had me blogging about sneakers, which I wasn't even getting paid for it. I just loved doing it. And then I had my job at the sneaker store, because I loved being around product and educating myself on product. And I had like OGs around me working there explaining to me like why certain colorways are on specific shoes and things like that. So I mean, I'm giving you guys like cliff notes, but that's like the very, very beginning. And a few years later, started Modern Notoriety.
For sure, man. I always like to ask people what their sneaker origin story is. I think we all have one as people who love shoes. I think being from Chicago is usually just enough to say, hey, this is why I'm into sneakers, considering, growing up in the 90s and MJ and the Chicago Bulls. But, what was the first memory or shoe that you can remember growing up where it really kind of like clicked for you, like, man, I really love sneakers, or I really need to have this one?
In Chicago, obviously we had like the Bulls era, and we had like the literally everyone you went to school with had at some point a pair of Jordans, right? My story is a little bit odd per se. Like I actually got into sneakers because of metal, heavy metal, like as in the genre of music. And I'm gonna explain to you how I got into that. It sounds very weird. In like the 90s, early 90s into like the late 80s, I'm a late 80s baby. So this is stuff this music I was catching up on in the mid 90s as I got older. A lot of drummers and a lot of frontmen were wearing Jordan 1s, and they were wearing footwear that wasn't too heavy and that wasn't too crazy, because they had to go back and forth on the stage, just for them to play a lot easier. One time I noticed that like even like Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses, like he had his own PE made by Converse. It was like this big ass Converse shoe, and it said Axl on the tongue. So then I was like, damn, like this is really cool. Like it didn't make sense to me at the time, but being from Chicago, watching basketball, growing up with Jordan, and also having been raised with that kind of music, I was like, damn, this is crazy, because I'm a big Metallica fan. So if you look at their early photos, like the bass players are wearing like Jordan 4s, the drummers wearing Jordan 1s, like it's crazy. So I'm looking at this, and then I'm looking at other bands that like wore Agassiz, that wore all these different kinds of like silhouettes, and I was just like, damn, like this is insane. But I don't think a lot of people noticed it at that time, but like now you see posts on it, talking about it a lot more.
I know you were on Nike Talk when you were growing up. Did you take that kind of like the education you're getting musically and start to kind of connect the dots to there's a crossover between heavy metal, but then there's also a whole other universe of different little like genres of sneakers, and is that how you started discovering that?
If it's one thing that I always admired about just sneakers, is that no matter what you're into, no matter who you are, you're always going to connect with someone that you might not have thought you might have something in common with through sneakers.
Yep.
Like I can meet the total polar opposite, but there's always going to be a pair that I can talk about. Or, you know, if you say like, is there a pair that you owned when you were a kid? And you know what I'm saying? Those conversations start, and then you just meet so many different people just off of a pair of sneakers. I mean, that's how a lot of us met different people through camping out, right? You know, through camping out at stores and just having conversations on footwear. People like Wale and Ben Baller, you know, they spent a lot of time on that too. You know, just sneakerheads, right? Just people into sneakers and just, you know, shooting the shit back and forth. And yeah, I spent a lot of time on Nike Talk.
You start transitioning into working in the stores and then starting your own blog. It's in kind of like the middle or the heart of what I like to consider the blog era. You said that must have been around 2011. Now this is your 10-year Modern Notoriety anniversary. So congrats to that. What made you want to take that step? You said that you were writing a little bit for a couple other sites, and I know that again, a lot of us, especially on this call, and people at our peers got started writing because now it's different with social media and YouTube and stuff. And not that there wasn't other avenues back then, but for me, I was like, yo, if I want to work in sneakers and I'm not a designer, I need to learn how to write. And that's kind of what was my motivation was. But taking a step past that to start your own, what was that like? What made you want to decide to do that?
When I started with Sneaker Files, I did it with the intention of writing about sneakers, but also writing about the sneaker stores in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, you know, there were a lot of events that would happen on the West Coast and East Coast. Like you would have like the Soul Collector events, and you have like Soul Bar opening up in 2007 in Vegas, and you have like a New York drop, you know, all these cool different things. And then like the only thing that we got was the Chamber of Fear that I saw was the LeBron release that happened here at the where you used to call it Nike Town. There were rarely any articles written about anything happening in Chicago. Like there's no articles on the Chamber of Fear release in the city. But the lack of media in Chicago was kind of the biggest motivator for me to even start. And again, I was doing it for free because I love doing it. You know, I just felt it in my heart, like, man, there's all these cool stores. Let me go to each one of them and just like write an article. And I had an Olympus camera that my mom bought me. I helped put a lot of Chicago sneaker stores like in the public eye, stores that people didn't even know existed. Eventually, 2011, I started working at it in 2010 and then launched it in 2011. I wanted to just do something different, right? I believe in this thing, and this is funny because I say this to this day, you have to zig while everybody zags, right? Gentry Humphrey, I met him at this event in Toronto. If they're doing it like this, we want to do it like that. When he said that to me, he was explaining like product technology, and at the time, I don't think he was with Jordan Brand anymore. I think he went to Nike Sportswear, I believe, at the time. But when he said that, he was pretty much talking about product innovation and doing different things than the other brands. So I've always used that. I always wanted to zig while everybody zags. You know, I always wanted to just write about different things that I grew up with, or you know, have all these nostalgic touches and just kind of just have my own thing and be in control of it without having any restrictions.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, and I don't mean any disrespect to people from Chicago, because obviously I consider that, you know, the birthplace of Jordan Brand, which is, in my opinion, humbly, you know, the coolest sneaker brand in the world. But I still feel like Chicago doesn't get a lot of credit as like a sneaker culture capital. We think of New York, we think of Tokyo, we think of Berlin, Portland, LA even now, a little bit more. But like, you know, Chicago, it's always had the flagship, and, you know, we just had All-Star there recently, but it still kind of feels like, for what it is and what it represents, like every single iconic colorway, like is a Chicago colorway or a Chicago inspired colorway, where you're talking about the bread or the actual Chicago, like do you feel that way too? And does that motivate you a little bit?
I think Chicago has been like a overshadowed city for quite some time. But then I think about how, compared to size and population and people, Chicago's still kind of like a drop in the ocean compared to like, you know, LA or a New York. What I am seeing is a lot of brands starting to want to be involved in just the Chicago heritage. especially with, like, we had All-Star Weekend, and Jordan Brand had an awesome activation. They were able to connect the dots and tell those stories. I think what's happening is a shift in just streetwear and sneaker culture in a way that hasn't been done before. Now, if we look at where we're at in time and technology and social media and the new generations that are coming up, current generation that's pushing the envelope when it comes to footwear and fashion, they're the ones that are starting to kind of like pave that road.
I had the opportunity to interview most of the Jordan Brand collaborators from All Star last year. It was a All Chicago Capsule, and one thing that was pretty consistent with all the people that I talked to is that there are some exceptions, obviously, like, Virgil doesn't live in Chicago full time anymore. But for the most part, a lot of those young creatives were really proud to be there. And they had the kind of a similar mission where it's like, hey, I could have moved to New York, or I did move to New York for a little while, but I wanted to come back and put on for my city because it deserves this. And I thought that was really cool because, again, you get all these pressures. Like for me, I had to move to New York to really get my career started. I'm obviously not from Chicago, I'm from a small town. But I thought that was really cool. And it seems like it's kind of something that all of the Chicago creatives feel right. Like they really want to put on for their city. And I remember I was actually hanging out with you in Chicago a few years ago, me, you, and Brendan Dunn after an event that I was in town for. And yeah. And you were talking about, oh, hey, I used to see so and so, so and so rapper used to live right there, and he used to perform here every Friday, and this and that. And I was just like, wow, like a lot of the people that we're seeing blowing up now, whether it be media, music, fashion, shoes, like it sounds like that community was formed a decade ago, right? And now you're starting to see a lot of these people pop up. But to you, you're like, oh, this isn't overnight. We've all been building here for a while. Do you get that sense too?
I think a lot of people kind of fall into the whole, if I'm gonna make it, I have to move to LA. If I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna move to New York. And there's a lot of individuals that I know that have taken that route from Chicago, but they come back like a year later. There's a saying that goes on in Chicago that if you can make it in Chicago, you can make it anywhere, right? And the fact that we're in the middle of the map, we're a big city, but if you really look at where Chicago is located and everything around Chicago and Illinois, it's all farms and cows and shit. Like, and we're in the, like, and we're like in like, we're up north, right? They call it the Windy City for a reason. And that's one of the reasons why I always wanted to stay here, was because I felt it, I saw it.
Just when you think about the roster of people that have come there from there and are continuing to come up there, we're talking about the two most important people in sneaker history, right? MJ playing there, and then Kanye being from there. But shifting gears back to your time, the early days, Modern Notoriety, you're basically working for out of the love of the game at this point, right? Just you're writing because you want to write, you're covering stuff because you want to cover it, because you love shoes. And then you mentioned, hey, I ran into G Money Gentry in Toronto, and you're starting to have all these opportunities come your way because the passion is starting to pay off. Do you remember a moment early on where you felt like I think we all feel this way as people who get into an industry you're really passionate about? Like, I remember for me, it might have been like the first time, I think I was writing for Finish Line Vlog, and they sent me like a pair of like Under Armour running shoes, right? It wasn't like, I was just excited that I was getting paid to write about shoes and I got free shoes, and like I didn't care if it wasn't like the best shoe in the world. It was just like, oh, it wasn't like that I fully made it, but it was like, yo, I like this feeling, I'm gonna keep going hard. Do you remember that first kind of I made it moment when you're like, oh, this is really cool, I'm getting paid to do this, or I'm getting access to this because I'm passionate?
I believe it was either 2014 or 2015. They had the launch of the Jordan 30, and they invited a bunch of media out, and we ended up playing basketball at MJ's house.
Yeah, I heard about that trip.
that was like, to me, that was like, holy shit. Like, and sometimes when you're living in the moment, and it's kind of hard to really grasp right when you're in that moment. It's only until after everything is done, it's like, damn, did I really just do that? But that was like a moment where I said to myself that, man, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Everyone that I talk to always talks about that trip. Like I've seen like Jock's video on it that has like tons of views. I think Chris from Wear Testers might have been there. I've seen him talk about that before. Even Joe LaPuma has mentioned that press trip. That sounds like one of those iconic ones that you had to be there for to really fully kind of get the depth of how cool that must have been.
Yeah.
Staying on that topic though, we could talk about press trips and seatings and all that all day, I know, with you, but I want to talk about, is there another press trip that you've been on, whether it was the early days or even now more recent, now that you're getting, you know, you're getting flown out these events to actually shoot and to be more involved in? Is there one that sticks out or one that you want to share with that just has a really cool story?
Nike Mag event, 2011, Montalban Theater in Los Angeles. I didn't have an invite. At the time, I was, I mean, I'm still friends with him. His name is Taylor, but he used to run a business called Shoepreme. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah. Taylor Valenzuela. Yeah. He's
Yeah. All right.
yeah,
Yeah. So like there were people that were posting like this DeLorean in front of a theater, and like, no one really knew what it was, but you know, MAGA hype. Everyone was talking about it. I, on a whim, I just booked my flights and went to LA. I didn't have an invite. I didn't have anything. I was just there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can finesse my way in this place, right? I don't know how he did it, but man, like and that was the first time I went to LA. I had no idea what I was doing. I met up with him, and we were just chilling. I got there like at 9 a.m. and the event didn't start till 6. The theater's packed. You know, security was there. We were standing up. We obviously, I mean, we didn't have a seat, so the security was like, "What do you guys?" Like they thought we were like staff or whatever.
yeah.
We eventually got kicked out, but we were lucky enough to see Tiffany Beers speak. And then we met Croatian Style there. First time I ever met Croatian Style, which was crazy. When he told us he was Croatian Style, like me being like an excited, like little, almost a young kid and shit, I was like, "You're Croatian Style?" out loud. And he was like, "Shh." He was doing that to me. And I was like, damn, but yeah, that was probably a trip that sticks out.